pause, stop recording. Recording. We got all new buttons. Hi, welcome. I'm Rick DiClemente in the Pittsburgh area with starself.com. And this is our astrology show. It's our little astrology fireside chat without the fire. We've been on about 17, 18 weeks, and I'm very pleased to announce that I'll be having some delightful guests on, maybe about one a month. And tonight we will be talking with Sally Patton, who I'll introduce to you in just a moment. Tonight's subject is all about the feminine and the launch of the feminine, the turning over to the feminine. I was planning on having this subject covered later, but since I want to stay in sync with what just happened in all these cities all over the world, and since my girlfriend just came back from DC, she's making me do this because she was on with these fanatical fans up in DC wearing these pink hats. So we're going to talk about the feminine. I'm going to get out of the way quickly and turn it over to Sally, but I want to say a few things to you astrologically first. First of all, I want you to know, if you're not used to looking at the planets, Uranus and Saturn are moving very fast, and they're moving very far. They're both going to 28 degrees of their respective signs, and that means Uranus is kicking butt in Aries, and Saturn is kicking butt in Sagittarius. So if you've got planets in those areas, things are happening quickly, and this is one reason we're getting our Arab Spring now, only now it's American. Things are really happening, and I don't have to open your eyes wide to show you this. I'm not going to talk much about the politics of things going on right now because it's just so insane. Next week, I will try to focus on what's happening with the USA's chart, with certain governmental figures, what's happening in their charts, what's happening internationally, etc. I want you to know a couple things. I'm going to get off of this trip. I'll just get down to the one thing. I've been giving a lot of thought to this rebirth of the feminine. And according to literature, and I'm sure Sally's more of an expert, the feminine had more of control of the world. It was more dominant about 30,000 years ago. And unfortunately, the patriarchal energies, the male energies, took over about then. And we see how well they've done with this might makes right that's gotten us nowhere but a lot of bloodshed. So I really think what we're seeing now in the White House is the last gasp of the male energy. I think it's very symbolic. And the more I learn about astrology, it's really, really a symbolic science. It really is beautifully symbolic. So I started studying, and traditional Western astrology can't really talk about the feminine age. It's not really built for that. It's on a smaller scale. Then I started thinking, we entered backwards. Remember, the ages, the sign of the ages go backward. And I'm going to show you this on the graphic. Okay. Okay, can you all see that? John, I can see you. Can you see that? Okay, we were in the age of Aries. In the age of Aries, these ages last over 2,000 years. We were in the age of Aries about 2000 BC up until the time of Christ. And we backed into the age of Pisces. It's not a coincidence that the Pisces symbol are the two fish, and so are Jesus Christ symbols, the two fish also. We've been in the age of Pisces for the last 2,000 plus years. Nobody knows exactly when the age of Aquarius is coming or if it's already come. We know we're on the cusp now. So to reiterate, we've been in the age of Pisces for 2,000 years. And we're at the edge of Pisces now, about to go into the age of Aquarius. And it's unfortunate that that song came out in 1968 that made everybody think that was the age of Aquarius, but it wasn't. We're approximately at the age now. But I started to think that when a planet is going through a sign, or when a planet is going through a house, there is what is called an anaretic degree. An anaretic degree. And this was given to me by the wonderful astrologer, Stephen Arroyo. All that means is the last degree. So think about Bugs Bunny hopping across the stage, and he gets off the stage and he pops his head back out and he says, that's all, folks. When a planet goes through a sign, it goes through 30 degrees, it gets to that last final degree, and at that 30th degree, it releases, and this is true, I've tested this, it releases all that it's been through for all those years. So I really highly suspect now that the age of the feminine, or whatever Sally wishes to call it, is coming about as an expression of 2025 or 2050 years of the age of Pisces coming to an end. Why? Because if you think of Pisces, Pisces is the sign that matches the feminine. It's not Cancer. It's not Scorpio. Pisces is inclusive, loving everybody, dropping your boundaries, bringing people into the whole in unconditional love. So I think I'm on to something. I think that it's one and the same. But we'll give that some more thought as time goes on. Now, I want to introduce Sally and how I met Sally. I read some marvelous book by Nook Sanchez, who is an expert on the Course in Miracles. She's a New Mexican too. She's originally from Australia. She will be a guest on this show. I've recently visited both of them. Liza and I did in New Mexico. Nook is from Australia. And for quite a while, Nook had her first book out called Take Me to Truth. And they had an organization of which Sally was the president. So I met Sally when she was the head of that organization. In the last couple of years, she and I have had some wonderful conversations. And recently, she's been working on some new things. She's a specialist in A Course in Miracles. She's also a specialist in JM's Way of Mastery and Marie Perron's A Course in Love. And what these are new transmissions to us from Jesus. They're new downloads. They're new versions of the Course in Miracles that are more emotion-based rather than intellectually based. So with that, I will turn this over to Sally. Let her bring to you her wealth of knowledge as we welcome her from the northwest corner of New Mexico via this wonderful software, Sally Patton. Well, thank you for coming, Sally.
Thank you very much, Rick. I'm delighted to be here, and I must say that meeting Rick was really, really a pivotal experience for me, and twice it's been a sort of a pivotal experience for me. I think that's why he's been in my life to kind of bring me messages, so I'm extremely grateful.
I think that's a good sign.
I just want to comment before I start on two things that Rick said. One was the idea that 30,000 years ago was the beginning of patriarchy and was the end of matriarchy. And the thing to remember is that matriarchy was as big of a mess as patriarchy is a big of a mess, because both the divine feminine and the divine masculine were out of balance in matriarchy and now in patriarchy. So when we bring those two things into balance, it ends all of the archies, if you want to use that term, but it brings us into becoming divinely human. And that's what we're after, becoming divinely human and creating the new earth. And then the other thing I wanted to comment about on the song, The Age of Aquarius and so forth, is that the 60s were seeded by the divine, by the ascended masters with songs to start us coming into the heart. And we needed that in the 60s and 70s to come into the heart We haven't done a very good job of it, but we had to start the process. And so there were lots of songs seeded during the 60s and 70s to help us do that. And that was the age of Aquarius. We are definitely entering the age of Aquarius. It's the age of golden miracles. It's going to be an astounding time, and it's going to lead us into thousands of years of this planet being a planet that now has divinely human beings as part of its creation. So what are we doing now? We are in this very, very beginning stage. And the reason why we're in this very beginning stage is because for the first time in 30,000 years, the voice of the divine feminine has been released. It's not fully present yet, but it's been released so that those of us who are on this call, who are light workers, we have felt that energy. And we have absorbed that energy. And so we are all vibrating at a higher level. Now, we may not feel like we're vibrating at a higher level, but trust me, we are. We have reached that pivotal point on this planet where enough of us are vibrating at the higher level that we can begin to leave behind the denser vibration of the third dimension, which is where Trump and all of the people that are supporting Trump are still residing. But as Rick said, it is the last gasp of patriarchy. Now, because we've had this habit of being in patriarchy, and I equate that to the ego, for so long, through many, many incarnations and through many parallel lives, even though we are the light workers, the way showers, whatever you want to call yourself, are vibrating at a higher level, we still slip back into old habits. And so we can slip back into the old habit of being fearful of what's happening with our political mess at the moment.
To go build a wall.
Yeah.
Right.
So even though we can slip back into it, this is going to be a pivotal year. This is going to be a pivotal year in which we cannot afford to slip back into fear. We cannot afford, as I said in my newsletter, we can either answer the call to fear or answer the call to love. We cannot afford to keep answering the call to fear any longer. And this year for light workers is not going to allow us to do that. So what's happening while we're vibrating at a higher level, we are also having all this crap come up. I'm talking individually now. All of this crap coming up of everything that is unlike love. Mm-hmm. Everything that we need to look at in our lives and heal. And this has all been made possible by the divine feminine. We have finally released it inside of ourselves individually. It will take longer to be released collectively. But just as all of this stuff that's coming up now for us to look at that is unlike love, the same thing is happening in the collective consciousness. And that's what's happening with Trump. Yeah. All of that stuff that was simmering below the surface has got to come up to be healed.
Now you'll notice that has a direct parallel to what we've been talking about for years about the Pluto transit in Capricorn, bringing all this stuff to the surface. One thing I want to point out that I think will help all of you connect this is this. Fascinating. On October 8th in 1965, Uranus and Pluto were together. That's what caused the 60s. It was in effect all through the 60s. You saw what happened. Okay, October 8th of 65. 51 years later, in the last several years, those two planets have been in the right angle. And that's what has all caused all of the testing to what the seed was born in 1965. And what that seed was, which gave us Medicare, Medicaid, women's rights, voting rights, black rights, they've come to their trial period. That's why you've had a repeat of all these issues. And even to this day, people are writing executive orders trying to correct it or change it or whatever. 10 days later, I need to shut someone off here. 10 days after Uranus and Pluto conjuncted, the Course in Miracles started to be downloaded to Helen Schuckman. 10 days later. So when I talked to Sally a couple years ago, and I saw this revolutionary test going on, Sally and I came to agreement that what was happening to the course was people wanted a more emotional course. And that's when Sally reported to me that people, yes, they want to get out of the left brain, psychiatric, clinical type of course that can be mind-breaking into more of the heart-based. And the final thing I want to say to you, Sally, is please mute your audio. If you're sitting there, right-click on your screen and mute your audio because we're getting feedback. The final thing I want to say to this is this. The real essence of 1965, the essence, was to start learning from our intuition, to get past the brain, to go to the heart. And since we've had this trial in the last couple years, we have failed. We've not been doing it. So it's exactly what Sally's saying. Now is the time that we have to make this shift. So you're perfectly in sync with the astrology of the times.
Okay, so while we are in this period, this year is going to be a very critical, pivotal year of vibrating at a higher level, but also, because I've certainly been happening to me in the past couple of days, I keep getting whacked by stuff coming up that I thought had been healed and it isn't healed yet. Anything that is unlike love is going to show up in your life this year. So you're going to have that. And you're also though, because of the divine feminine voice being released, you're also going to be able to create more quickly. Anything that's coming from your desires and your intents is going to be able to create more quickly. So to understand exactly what the divine feminine voice is and how it started and all of this, we need to kind of go back and look at patriarchy. We need to look at, so there's I want to say about the Course of Miracles is that it's still a valuable channeling. However, there were many of us that needed more of a heart-based. And so that's why the Way of Mastery and A Course of Love came along. And the Course of Love is actually a sequel to the Course of Miracles. But in the Course of Miracles, there's still much, much wisdom. And one of the things the Course of Miracles talks about is that when we decided to choose the experience of separation, we chose not to laugh. It isn't that we made a mistake. We chose not to laugh. We chose to experience what it was like to separate from God. And even though that's an impossibility, because we can't separate from love, we can't separate from God, that is the truth of who we are, we still wanted to experience what it was like. And in doing that, we created a rather incredible dream and a rather incredible illusion. And it is so incredible that we fell into it and we believed in it. But what we are doing now, and A Course of Love explains this really clearly and beautifully, is that we chose to do this because in so doing, and returning to Christ consciousness and the truth of who we are creating something new that has never been expressed in God's vast universes, planets, has never been expressed before. We are creating something new. We are becoming divinely human. That has never happened before. And we couldn't do that without exploring suffering, which is the result of separation. And in order for us to create separation, then we had to divide our oneness, and we divided our oneness into bodies. We divided in the feminine energy, and we put that in the woman's body, and the masculine energy we put in the man's body, so that we could divide. When we are in union with God, there is great individuation, but in separation, it becomes division. And that division between the divine masculine and divine feminine, or the masculine and feminine energies, creates all of the other separations, creates all of the divisions. And we're masters at it. All you have to do is look outside and see how we have become masters of separation. We separate whites from blacks. We separate Anglos from Spanish speaking. We separate children from adults. We separate. That's what we do. And that's how come the illusion of separation has lasted for so long. But we have gotten so good at exploring suffering, and we really have done a wonderful bang-up job of exploring suffering, but it's done. We may have a habit of slipping into fear, but it's done. There's nothing else to explore.
Why did we explore suffering?
Because we chose separation. It's synonymous. Separation and suffering go together.
Okay.
But remember, keep remembering that we chose to do this because we are actually creating something new as a result. So one of the things, when we divided feminine energy into women's bodies under patriarchy, the positive feminine energy is intuition, is compassion, is nurturing, is the creation from the womb. But at the same time as giving women those positive feminine energies, we demean them. We say that they're weak, and we say that they're passive. Then for the men, we gave them the positive masculine energies of progress, of, I need to look at this one again, because power, of action. And we made them dominant, and we made them as the most important part of being in control. What happens then is when we divided it inside of ourselves. We lost the ability to access our feminine energy because we decided it was weak. And for men, if they admitted that they were going to access their feminine energy, they would look weak to other men. Right. It becomes something that is so demeaned, so suppressed. And when it becomes that suppressed and demeaned, then they have to look outside of themselves to women to provide what they think they've lost inside themselves.
Perfect.
And when the women cannot answer that call, they'll never be able to satisfy that need for the feminine within inside. That leads to hatred, blame, and the extreme of patriarchy, which is misogyny.
Beautifully said.
When we, let me regroup here for a moment. So under patriarchy, we got so good at it And I'm equating patriarchy with the ego. We got so good at it, and we've been doing it for so long, it's become a habit. And so even though we're vibrating, a lot of us vibrating at a higher level, the habit still sometimes remains. So we need to be kind to ourselves when we slip back into that habit. Now, one of the things I have found that helps us, or at least has helped me, understand better the divine feminine and divine masculine, is to equate it with other words and terms that we use. Some of you have probably read Jill Bolte Taylor's the book, My Stroke of Insight. Raise your hand if anybody has read that. So you'll know what I'm talking about. She was a doctor of the brain, to put it simply, and she had a massive stroke on her left side of her brain. And because she was a doctor of the brain, neuroanatomy, and understood how it was put together, she was a perfect woman or perfect person to understand what was happening when her left side of her brain started to deteriorate. And what she did is she found herself unable to talk, unable to write, unable to do left brain functions, but she was existing now solely from her right side of her brain, and she was in complete bliss. All of her cells were in union with the oneness of the universe, with our source. And so even though she was conscious, she couldn't do stuff, she was also in complete bliss. So as she began to recover, she knew she didn't want to return to solely only functioning from the left side of her brain. She knew she wanted to join in harmony with the right side of her brain, which is bliss, which is the heart, which is the divine feminine. The left side of the brain is the mind, is the divine masculine. And the two need to balance. Just as the two sides of the brain come together in harmony and allows people like Einstein to be the creative genius that he was, it also brings the divine feminine and the divine masculine together. So I equate the right side of the brain with the heart and with the divine feminine. And I equate the left side of the brain with the positive divine masculine, which is needed to support the heart. But what happened in patriarchy is our left brain took over. It became dominant. It led. And when and Jill Bolte Taylor talks about these left brain loops that we get into that doesn't allow any of the wisdom of the heart of the right side of the brain to come in to help solve problems. When we get into those loops, that's the ego. When we return, and for instance, in the Course of Love, Jesus uses the terms when the mind and heart come together in wholeheartedness. When the divine masculine and the divine feminine come together in wholeheartedness. When we work in harmony. That's what allows us to heal into wholeness and to become divinely human. So this brings me to the Woman's March and what that represents in the release of the voice of the divine feminine. Now, remember when I said under patriarchy, when we gave women those, and by the way, the only reason why separation works is because we did try to model it after the truth. Within us, we have both the masculine and the feminine. In separation, we separated them, but we also gave the woman the feminine energy that supposedly the women hold within their bodies, we also gave the women the womb, the power to create, the power to birth. And that is also true for our source. The Great Mother, the Divine Mother, the black womb of nothing is the source of all creation, including the Divine Father. It makes sense. You can't have it any other way. All we have to do is look at animals, look at what's outside. The feminine side is the creation side. It can also, though, be chaotic. And that's why we need the divine masculine to provide clarity, to provide support, to provide protection.
What is it that brought us to, I know astrologically, but what is it that brought us to last weekend?
Okay, so that's what I'm getting to. And in order to do that, I want to tell just a brief story about the goddess Kali and the god Shiva, which comes out of the Hindu mythology, because it's a perfect example of what has happened with the divine feminine voice. So in the Hindu mythology, the gods and the demons were having a great war. So if you think about the gods as being the compassionate side and the demons being the controlling side, the patriarchal side. And the gods were losing the war. And the goddess Durga, out of her forehead, sprung Kali, the goddess Kali. And she was fierce. And she saw those demons. And she said, they are not going to win. And she fought the demons, Kali being the representation of the fierce divine feminine. She fought those demons and won the war. But what happened was then she couldn't stop. She just kept fighting, and she was getting chaotic, and she was getting crazy. And the gods said to Shiva, who was her husband, Shiva, you have got to do something. She's won the war, but now she's creating havoc and destructiveness. And what do we do about that? So Shiva tried reasoning with her. Shiva tried dancing with her. Shiva tried seducing her. Shiva tried all of this, and nothing worked until he laid down on the ground and exposed his belly and supported her and said, Shiva, I accept you for what you are. And she stopped. And she became rational again. And what this represents is that Shiva, the divine masculine, is very much needed to balance the divine feminine, or the divine feminine can become destructive. So the divine masculine provides support, protection, and clarity to the divine to the divine feminine. So we come to the March. The March was the divine feminine voice no longer being passive. It was Kali's fierce divine feminine voice saying, we've had enough. This is no longer acceptable. You can play around in the third dimension and patriarchy, but it's no longer acceptable. And the fierceness of love is going to win out. But this fierceness of love, not being passive, doesn't mean that it's being destructive, because we have the divine masculine supporting us now. Because when we freed the divine feminine, we freed the divine masculine. So that march, it was so empowering. I went on the march in Santa Fe. It was so empowering. It was the vibration and the level of connection and the level of love and the numbers. I had to laugh. because there was this congressman in New Mexico that said, well, look at all those women. They just need to be slapped around a bit and put back into the kitchen. And I thought, you don't put millions of women back in the kitchen. It's not going to work. He can make all the noises he wants, but it's not going to happen because the voice of the divine feminine is no longer passive. And it also has the support of the divine masculine with it. And we're not going to go back into the bottle. We're not going to go back into the kitchen. This is the beginning. It is the beginning. And it is so profound. I will have to admit, before the march, I was devastated by the election of Trump. And it took quite a while for me to finally come back into peace and come back into myself, and which is when I wrote that newsletter, when I was saying, I cannot afford to answer the call of fear. I can't slip into fear any longer. It's no longer acceptable. I have to do whatever I can to answer the call of love.
Please give the viewers the name of your website, or how they can join your newsletter to get your wonderful newsletter. Then I got a question for you.
Okay. The name of my website is embracechildspirit.org. And I can explain that when I go a little further.
Well,
and if you go to the website, there is a place where you can contact me to sign up for a newsletter. You can see my latest newsletter. I also have some blogs. And right now, along with everybody else, I'm in such transition. I am not real sure what I'm going to be offering. At the moment, I am doing a group that is closed on the reunion of the Divine Feminine and Divine Masculine with Sajit Green. But I don't know if I'm going to continue to do that. I just don't know. Just like all of you, I'm in this period of transition and waiting to see what I'm going to be called to do.
I'll give you all a little bit of advice. Don't call her and ask her a question unless you're prepared for the answer. Because she's a Virgo woman, and she will tell you what work you've got to do, and she'll tell you black and white, and she's exactly right. One of the things that I was thinking about, Sally, is I saw something that blew my mind on Facebook the last few pages, and I understand it, but it was said so much. Somebody came up with the phrase, I don't remember where I read in my history books that being kind and nice would have stopped the Nazis. And all these people piled on board, yeah, that's right, being kind, and we had to be tough and mean. And of course, when you got the Germans trying to take over the planet, you got to meet them with an equal or greater male force to defeat them. But it showed me some of the finer minds that I know didn't even understand this principle, that if we had been kinder from the very beginning, we probably wouldn't have this huge problem coming out of the Middle East with the drones, etc. Or I'm sure you would call that the feminine. My question to you is, I've come up with something in the past year and a half, and I'm sure it syncs with you, but I want to know what you think. How does this sync with your mentality? This sense I've got universally of this is the age of the end of mea culpa.
The end of what?
Mea culpa.
Ah.
How does that fit with your thoughts?
Well, to sort of respond is that this is not the 1930s.
Right.
In the 1930s, we were still playing around with third dimensional darkness and stuff. There were not enough people like there are now who were vibrating at a high enough level to actually respond to the Nazis in a loving way. It just would not have worked. It's part of the process that we've been going through. But then, you know, from what I understand, until like 2012, we could have gone either way in destroying ourselves. So this, in 2012, was when we actually had that tipping point, when there were enough of us that were vibrating at a higher level that we can now say that we are not going to destroy ourselves. So all I can say for people who are so worried about Trump being a Hitler type of figure is, this is not 1930s Germany. It's not going to happen.
And Pluto was discovered in 1930.
Ah, right. And
why do you feel so assured of what you just said?
It's, I'm assured because I feel the divine feminine rising, and we have evidences of it absolutely everywhere.
Is that what all the women were saying when you watched all these reports from this weekend? So many of them were saying, I can't explain it. It's a feeling bigger than me. It's coming up through me. Is that what they're talking about?
Yes, yes.
That's wonderful. What a wonderful thing.
Absolutely huge. And as I said, before the march, I still could slip back into fear. After the march, I am totally and completely confident that we are here now in the beginning of this new golden age of miracles.
Wow. Wow.
And one of the other things that I have a couple of ideas, a couple of things that we can do to keep ourselves from falling into fear. So I'll go through those. But one of the things that my friend Sajid said to me is that you can see Donald Trump as the divine catalyst in clown's clothing. Because look at it. Look at what he has started. He has started a revolution.
Yes, he did.
And it's a revolution based on compassion.
Yeah.
That's what's different between now and 1930s. Because all of everything that is happening now is being based on love and compassion. Of course, people are still angry, but remember, when I talk about the fierce divine feminine, that is a fierceness, a roar of saying this is no longer acceptable. We cannot keep polluting Mother Earth. We cannot keep destroying our children's lives. We cannot keep doing this. This is no longer acceptable. And we are going to make the change from compassion and from love. That's what they're doing at Standing Rock. If you follow the Standing Rock leaders, they're doing this from compassion and from love and saying that this is no longer acceptable. And the prophecy of what they're doing now happened a long time ago with White Buffalo Woman, giving them the pipe of peace. This has been known for a long time with what they're doing, that the indigenous cultures are now going to come forward and do the same thing with the release of the divine feminine. It is no longer acceptable. But we are not going to hate those people who still want to play in the third dimension. We're just going to let them do it. We're going to let them play. They're going to have a grand time, and we're going to be creating the new over here. And eventually they're going to see, wow, they're having a hell of a lot more fun than we are. And it's going to dissolve. Thank you.
And the beautiful thing is, if I think that I ask you to be my guest, or if we think some other force, I wanted to have Kathy Pagano on this show, who is a friend in Rhode Island, an astrologer. She's very big into the feminine. And it just so happened that she's still in Dubai and she couldn't do it. So I wanted you to also talk about it. So we put the second one first before the first one, and you end up fitting in here perfectly. So it just shows you how it's all in sync perfectly no matter what you try to do anyway.
Well, yes, and of course, personally, this helps me because I'm finding my voice as the divine feminine. And
I don't think you have to find very much, Sally. You've got it pretty sharp, I think. Could you take a moment, because the crowd doesn't know you, could you mind taking a moment explaining to people briefly what that book is you have on Amazon about helping your children to see them for perfect as they are, etc.?
Okay, and this is actually, thank you, Rick, because that actually kind of helps me segue into what we can do personally when we start slipping into fear or start slipping into wanting to hate those people that, you know, are like Trump, who are writing all of these presidential declarations saying you can't have abortion anymore, that we're going to let all, you know, we're going to let all of these pipelines go through, da 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 da. It's easy to slip into hate. So I talk about perfect timing. Yesterday, I got an email from a friend of mine who sent me an article from the New York Times. I wrote it down who this was. Paul Kelleher, I believe. Anyway.
Coelho.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a big spiritual writer.
For the New York Times. Well, he wrote an article called No One is Broken. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, Sally, because the name of my book is Don't Fix Me, I'm Not Broken, Changing Our Minds About Ourselves and Our Children. And it's basically a book about learning to parent without fear. It is informed by A Course of Miracles. It was before I became a student of A Course of Love and dropped more into the heart. However, in this article, and what my friend said, you know, you were the beginning of all of this. And I thought, yes, I was, because that's what I used to do. I used to work with parents of children who had been labeled, helping them to see past the label to the whole child, hoping to understand that nobody is broken. None of us are broken. And he reminded me in this article, we both knew a lot about a program called the Sunrise Program. He has a child that's on the autism spectrum, and he embraced the Sunrise Program, so did I. And in the Sunrise Program, one of the things you learn to do with your child is to join them wherever they are. Rather than trying to force them into your world, you join their world. So if the child's flapping their hands or whatever they're doing, you do it from a place of love. You just join their world. And as he said, his son with autism turned around and immediately said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm just joining with you." And they did this consistently for many years. Bears Kaufman, who started the Sunrise Program, did it with his child with autism and brought his child totally and completely out of autism by this loving approach. But I don't want to get too much into that. We can get turned away. But the point is, what if we look at Trump and Pence and Paul Ryan and da-da-da-da-da and didn't see them as broken?
Right.
What would happen? Because no one is broken, especially yourself. So what would happen if you totally and completely looked at yourself and saw you were not broken and totally embraced all of those parts of yourself you still dislike? Envisioning yourself as, this is where the embraced child comes in, envisioning yourself as this innocent, perfect child that for some reason you've decided is broken, and embrace that child. Embrace the innocent child that you've decided you don't like. That aspect of yourself you don't like. Let's embrace ourselves. See ourselves completely as not broken. And when we do that, we can see Trump and everybody that's following him as not broken.
Well, when you take a look astrologically at Mr. Trump's chart and you get past the blabbing, the very center of the chart, in my opinion, and I've said this from the beginning, is a child who feels that he's unlovable, that he can't get any love, that he's not worth love. And even when you give him love, he's still complaining he's not getting enough of it. He's like such a sponge and in need of it. And he's got this tremendous need to say, you're fair, you're not being fair, you're fair, you're not being fair. And I think it's really that simple. And I love your non-abrasive approach to it. Because the other way, if you just keep rubbing him the wrong way, it's not going to work. He's just going to get more and more anti-everything. But that's exactly what's at the center of his chart. And is that not always pretty much true for most people?
It is. And when we drop into the heart, see ourselves as not broken, that is when our divine feminine self can come forward in love. And when we release the divine feminine inside of ourselves, then that releases the divine masculine to join in harmony and in wholeness. When we look at Trump, he has buried that divine feminine so deep within himself.
Right.
He's too scared to access it because he's been told that a man can't do that, can't be feminine.
Right.
So what has he done? He's looked outside of himself to women to provide that for him, and they keep failing him. And so he keeps being driven more and more into hatred and blame for the women for failing him.
Sure.
So we can see this. Yeah, Rick, what?
So what do we do as a country who is going through such a major identity crisis? What do we do now that we've had that wonderful success? Thank you to all who attended these rallies. We've gone up that one big step. What do we do now? I know you're a Virgo and you have answers and you have books about how to and all that. You're the perfect person. What do we do besides generalities of keep opening our heart? What is the next step for us to do collectively?
The collective is not going to work unless you have done your inner work.
Wow, perfect answer. Please explain.
So
perfect answer.
We've done a good job. I know I have, of sometimes pretending that I'm spiritual, but it doesn't work. It's just,
but I know you and you do your work. I mean, you try to work at it. You know, so that's all one can ask. And
yes,
we need to reiterate this.
Okay, so the inner work. I've talked a little bit about that, a little bit about viewing people as not broken, especially yourself. Part of the inner work is that whatever is coming up in you that is unlike love, to allow the feelings, embrace them. Allow the fear, embrace it. Because if you don't allow it and embrace it, what you do is you just stuff it. And we've been really good at stuffing.
Would you please give us an example of how that comes up inside somebody, how not to react to it, and the proper way to react to it? I think that's very important.
I do this in a number of ways. So let's go to what I did with Trump and I'm still working on with Ryan. For some reason, Ryan pushes my buttons even more than Trump. Is that there is a technique that Paul Selig, who channels the Ascended Masters, is a beautiful, beautiful channel. One of the things he suggests you do with people who push your buttons, people who you want to project your blame and hatred onto, is that you envision taking them into a cave. And I did this with Trump over and over and over and over again, sometimes several times during a day. I would envision him in a cave. And then I added this piece. I would take his face in my hands and look at him in the eyes. Took me a while to do that. I really didn't want to look at him in the eyes. I took his face, I looked at him in the eyes, and I said, I see you in your beauty. I see you in your right to be. I see you. And as your witness, I free you from the darkness I have put you in. And then I take his hand and I walk out of the cave into the light and envision both of us coming into the light. Now, the reason why that works is because, remember, we are all in union with God, one with God. Donald Trump is a spiritual being like all of us. He's just, his oversoul, thank God, is actually agreed to play this role so that the divine feminine could come up so we could do this and enter this golden age of miracles on earth and create the new. So remember, we are all one. So with that darkness in Donald Trump is also in me. That energy is also in me. So by being his witness and taking him into the light, I'm taking myself into the light. I do this with anybody that pushes my buttons. I do this with anybody that for some reason I've decided to see is broken, because no one is broken. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do, I go back to, it's been the most effective for me. You may find other ways that are most effective, but several years ago, I bought a doll with blonde yarn, glasses, and carrying a book. And I didn't quite understand at the time why I had to buy this doll, but it was clear guidance on my part that I had to buy this doll. It took several years. You would think, duh, I know why I bought it, but it took actually several years for me to figure it out. But I run a Course of Love group here in Abiquiu. And one of the women said to me at the time, she says, the best thing I can do to help forgive myself is I hug a doll. And I went, oh, I've got a doll. I can hug a doll. And then when I got the doll, I looked at it and I went, whoa, this is me when I was young. This was me. I always had my head in the books. I wore glasses and I had blonde hair. So there is a book that I've been reading that they have allowed me to talk about, at least to mention this book. It's called the Sophia Code. But in the Sophia Code, in this book, one of the feminine divine ascended masters is Kuan Yin. And she did walk the earth before she became a goddess, a Buddhist goddess. And one of the things Kuan Yin has you do is imagine yourself as a 7-year-old child. For me, 7 years old didn't work. It was 4 or 5 years old that worked best for me. And she has you imagine yourself as this 4 or 5-year-old innocent, beautiful child, and then watch what we have done to this innocent child over the years by believing we're separate from God, by judging ourselves and others. You can see it being taken out on this child's body. And it's a very wonderful visual, because you go, oh, geez, you wouldn't want to do that to any child. You wouldn't want to not embrace a child. So you look at yourself, and I have done this exercise several times. It was finally on the last time I did the exercise that it finally took. So it's a process. And that's one of the things I want to say in this process. Don't judge yourself if you don't achieve enlightenment in the first time around. So finally, as I watched myself and totally embraced this child, it kind of kept morphing between this innocent 4-year-old that I could see of myself and also this doll. And I realized all of a sudden that this doll and 4-year-old child and I were just plain grinning at each other in total, complete love for each other. And that's when I felt the switch. I really felt a switch into loving myself more. So that now anything that's unlike love comes up, the healing of it is quicker. So I recommend that. I recommend doing that, and I recommend doing it over and over and over again until you feel a switch. So that's another way to do the inner work.
So in other words, while so many people, and I think it's pretty much true, so many people are walking around scared to death right now for so many reasons, you just do your work, let that shine forth, and then do more of your work. And just keep doing your work. Right?
Yes. And sort of what I want to talk about, just sort of end with, is that we really have to be vigilant. Not to fall into fear. We have to be really, really vigilant about this. This is not an easy thing to do. We would like to snap our fingers, but the thing of it is, we've been living thousands and thousands of years under patriarchy and separation. We have developed such ingrained habits that even vibrating at a higher level, we fall back into those habits. It's just like learning to play the piano. It takes an immense amount of practice, and we have to be vigilant. Because the other thing, one of the things that it says in the Course of Miracles is we teach what we need to learn. Everything out of our mouth teaches. When I finally grasped that, I realized that I don't want stuff coming out of my mouth that perpetuates the hatred, that perpetuates the fear. I want to be able to have stuff coming out of my mouth that teaches the love that we are, so that we will return to the love that we are, so that we will return to passionate consciousness that we are. This isn't about doing something to achieve enlightenment. This is about remembering that we already are love. We can't learn love because we already are love.
Right.
What we're doing is removing the blocks to love's awareness. That's what we're doing. We're not learning love. We're just removing those blocks.
That's a wonderful parallel to exactly what astrology does. I promised here we can start segueing towards opening the floor up for questions. If you do want to ask Sally a question, remember to unmute yourself before you do. And I promised via chat messages that Vicki Hanchin would be able to tell her story. Vicki, would you mind?
Hi, am I off mute now?
You're off mute. To speak up a little bit, please.
Okay. All right. So I really love the imagery that you're sharing, Sally, about seeing Trump as a divine master in clown's clothing. And I have to say that in my own life, there have been some pretty interesting phenomena coming from spirit and intuition that have been giving messages that I only now am understanding more clearly because they were very surprising at the time. I was given a skull from Grandmother Florida Mayo. People who know me in the Peaceburg community, as we call it, have seen the skull. It's there in our community ceremonies and events. This skull was gestated with Grandmother Florida Mayo's crystal skull, and it carries the frequencies of unconditional love and unity from that original crystal skull. And she makes these smaller baby skulls that she disseminates for other people so that these frequencies can go out into the other communities that she's been with. So Peaceburg has one of these skulls. And I was in ceremony, it was on the weekend of 9/11, actually, with some friends in ceremony in 2015. And we were in a time of very deep silence in this pipe ceremony. It was just a small group of us. And out of this deep silence, an energy started coming into my body. The Florida Mayo skull was on the altars that we were working with the sacred pipe. So out of the silence, this big energy starts filling up my body, and I start giggling, and then I start laughing, and then I start breaking out in this unstoppable laughter that was just hilarious. And then this voice starts coming through me that didn't sound like my voice. And it delivered what I now understand, what I call the Peaceburg prophecy, or the prophecy of this skull, because the message came out and it said in a voice kind of like this: "This gonna be fun." Anyone who thinks it ain't gonna be fun, they got the wrong message. And we all in the ceremonies just broke out into laughter, rolling around. We could not stop ourselves. And then all of a sudden my guest said, "You just channeled the fourth river through that skull, didn't you?" Because in our Pittsburgh, we have our rivers that are connected with the Mayan elders visit here, and we have the underground fourth river. And my skull's name from Florida Mayo is called Laughing Waters. That's just a recent discovery, Rick. I only learned that just a year and a half ago or so. So Laughing Waters is giving this message. And I puzzled about this and puzzled about it. And I was like thinking, it doesn't look like much fun down here. Why would this message come through? What could this mean? And I kept thinking about it. And then I thought, if there were something that would occur where suddenly we would be shattered out of the illusion of our separation and really get in a very embodied, visceral way that we are interconnected, that we are really one, that would just change everything, and then things would get really fun. And so that's how I was understanding that message. And then when Trump got elected, I was thinking, it's not going to be fun for a long time now. What's this going to be? But then when we had the march, I thought, wow, he's such a unifier. Mm-hmm. And he can't stop it no matter what he does.
Here's something I want to interject here for Sally. Thank you, Vicki. And we can all pitch in on this, but I really think this is critical. Susan Aver asked this question earlier. I asked the question. I get it all the time. And this is for Sally. We're all so used to thinking that we're piece of God. We're a linear piece of God. We just don't get it that if we fix ourselves, we fix the universe. We're not fixing a part of it. We fix ourselves. We fix everything. That's the quantum age. Now, that's my pathetic way of putting it. Sally, can you expound on that? Because I think that's really critical.
Well, the first thing I would want to say is that we're not fixing anything.
Yeah. Thank you. Coming from a Virgo, who I'm always lecturing to.
Yes, I was going to say, which you always are. So we aren't fixing anything. We're returning to our truth.
Okay, I return to my truth. By doing that, I return everybody.
Correct.
Now that's where we need some learning.
And one of the things that I think is a lot of light workers that a lot of us are feeling is that we truly are the forerunners, the way showers. And so it sometimes feels more difficult. It feels like, sometimes I feel like I'm walking through molasses. And I love the Vicky's idea that we're going to have fun, but sometimes it doesn't feel like we're having fun. And and the thing about
That was timely.
that was good. I love the laugh.
Yeah, it was real good.
So when we return to the truth of who we are, that's when we access our joy. And in some ways it feels like a catch-22. How many of you all sometimes feel like this is a catch-22? Because I can't feel joy until I return to myself, but how do I return to myself without the joy?
Right.
So it sometimes does feel like a catch-22. And all I can say is that's where we have to be vigilant, because that's the habit of separation taking us and making us believe that this has to be difficult.
Okay, everybody far away, open your mics, ask your questions. It's free for all now. Ask whatever questions you have for Sally, please.
I have a question, Rick.
Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder, Sally, how you feel about the dream world. I was a dream facilitator for 5 years out of Illinois, and I feel a lot of what you're talking about, the soul growth or the activation of the masculine, feminine within yourself in this time that we live in. There are certain ways that you can access growth, perhaps through the dream world, especially if you do what's called lucid dreaming. I don't know you and you don't know me, but a year ago I wrote a piece in a local paper about predictions for 2016, and most of the trends came true, but the overall message in that was that there's going to be a lot of people hunkering down in fear, and there's going to be a lot of people embracing the love within themselves, embracing love. And that seems to be a factor in 2016. And I have never really studied the Course in Miracles. But I just wanted to bring up the dream world. That's a part of our subconscious, and I think that's a powerful tool to use. And I don't know if you have any of the dream work material.
What is your question, Suzanne?
Do you have the dream work material in your books?
Oh, no, I don't. So I think it's pretty clear that you probably know more about this than I do. However, when we totally turn over our journey of awakening to our higher holy self, the higher holy self will find any way to get through to you.
Right.
Through dreams, certainly has happened with me, through visions during the day, through spirit animals. The spirit animals speak to me all the time. I have a great horned owl who's my main spirit animal that shows up at my house periodically. So your higher holy self will find anything within you to get the message across and to help you awaken. And so for you, it sounds like it's dreams and your work with the dream world. And I think that's wonderful, and I would continue to do it.
I got a real good answer for you too. Is Kathy Pagano will be coming on this show pretty soon. She is an expert on the feminine. She is a Jungian. She is a dream interpreter, and I look very much forward to her response here or there. The next question, thank you, Suzanne. The next question was coming from Karen D. Your mic is on, Karen.
Okay, and I will start this with a little statement. Pardon my voice. It's been a rugged 10 days. I was told probably 40 years ago by somebody that God didn't make no junk. It was probably, for me, one of the best things I could have ever heard. And it has allowed me, and I wanted to know from Sally, like the doll for her, when I see people, it helps me to remember God didn't make no junk. And it's allowed me to work with a lot of disabled children.
Is that a question for or verification?
I wanted to know if that's the kind of thing she's talking about with her doll.
Well, yeah, it's all intertwined. I mean, it goes back to there's no one is broken.
Mm-hmm.
So God made no junk is the same thing as no one is broken. And so I use that doll for me to help me embrace the side of myself that I still want to judge, the side of myself that still feels that I'm unworthy,
Wow.
the side of myself that says, you can't go and you can't talk to these people. What do you know? You don't know a thing. Well, it's true, I don't know anything. But
I think you know a whole lot.
well, but in a sense, that emptiness and that spaciousness allows the truth of ourselves.
Yeah, let me reiterate to people, because I go through this myself on this show. The Course of Miracles has 3 books, and the 3rd book is the Manual for Teachers. And the main thing Jesus says in that book is, go and teach. That's how you learn. You don't learn unless you teach. But if you sit back waiting, I got to feel qualified before I can teach, it's not going to happen. Go and teach, because when you open your mouth, the truth comes out. Next question for Sally. Thank you, Karen. Next question. Who's up next? Sparrow, I see you. I know you're old buddies. Used to work together, but I could see a question forming in your brain there.
I didn't even know Sparrow was here.
Yeah, the old partner of yours. There she is down in the corner. Sparrow, can you say something?
Ah, there you are.
There you,
Thanks,
there you go.
Sparrow.
They
Love
used to work together with Take Me to Truth. Test your microphone, Sparrow. Down in your lower left corner, there is an up arrow. And if you flick that up arrow, you should be able to affect your microphone. I'm going to stop the recording now, so we can continue.